I'm Jennifer Kennedy, the lead for quality at CHAP, and welcome to this month's CHAPcast. Today, I'm so delighted to talk with another hospice expert and a friend, Katie Wehri from NAHC, and we're going to be talking about many must-know items for hospice care and things that are happening in hospice. Welcome, Katie, and Happy New Year. I'm so glad you're with me today.
Happy New Year, and thank you so much for having me. It's so great to talk with you again. It's been a while, and this is a great time for us to kind of, as we start the new year, hit all these really important topics that everybody's dealing with right now.
Oh my God, there's so many, right? But before we jump in, Katie, can you introduce yourself to our listeners and talk a little bit about what NAHC is?
Sure, absolutely. Well, the National Association for Home Care and Hospice is the largest professional association, and we represent the interest of chronically ill, seriously ill individuals all across America. And we represent the interest of about 35,000 different hospice and home care organizations. I am the director of Home Health and Hospice Regulatory Affairs at the association, and I've been working with NAHC for about a decade now. But this is, I think, my 33rd year in hospice. And prior to working with NAHC, I was working with hospices on the administrative side of care in various roles throughout the Midwest primarily.
Well, that's great. 33
Very glad
years.
to be with you today.
That's a long time.
It's showing my age.
Yeah, well, I won't say how many years I've been around the block, but thank you for all your service. I mean, it's much needed. So how did we get here today? My colleague and our producer, Dan McPhilmy, we looked at your email that came out from your organization. I want to say like late December. It sort of gave the laundry list, if you will, of items that are happening in the hospice space, and quite a long list there, Katie, of things that are happening. And we're like, oh my gosh, we need to really talk to someone from NAHC. And you're the first one who popped into my head because we've known each other for so many years to really give us that, high level of what's happening with several of these items. And again, thank you for coming on to talk to us about it. I want to start out with VBID. VBID. Gosh, that's been like I don't know. Do I call it a bane? I think many hospice providers think it's a bane, but what's happening with the VBID demo right now?
Sure. And I think as we think about VBID, just a couple of reminders for myself even about how we got here and why we're even here. For 40 years, hospices were carved out, if you will,
right,
from Medicare Advantage. And then this Medicare Advantage value-based insurance design demonstration model was put into place. And really what CMS has focused on, and CMMI, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, as you know, where MAVBID lives,
yes,
really, they've made it very clear that their goal is, I think, by 2030, to have every single Medicare beneficiary tied with some sort of value-based payment program. So that's how this all started. And I kind of have to remind myself of that. Like you said, it's not really been in existence for a while, but with all the issues that we've dealt with, it seems like a very long time. So the model was started in 2021. It's expected to go through 2024. So we've just started that third year of the model. And we just recently got our first insight into kind of the evaluation.
Is there a report available?
There is.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. And I think we can even provide a link. You can share that with the CHAPcast listeners later on.
Great.
But the evaluation came out in the fall of 22. Now it's an evaluation of the first year. So a lot remains to be seen yet. Without any data, they really couldn't get into quality components because there's really no comparison. So we expect more information on utilization, more information on the quality component of MAVBID in those future years evaluations. But from that first year insight that we had, there's some one really very interesting piece of data that I wanted to share.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is that the first year of MA VBID had about 9,600 enrollees. And when you compare that number to the number of enrollees prior to VBID being implemented, it's the same.
Is it really?
It is the same.
Wow.
So there's no, that may change as the years go on here. I think I saw somewhere that in 2022, CMS was expecting 20,000 enrollees to take advantage of hospice. Now, whether or not that occurred, we won't know yet. It'll take probably until fall of 2023 until we see that 22 report.
Yeah, see that
I thought
data.
that was very interesting.
That is
There's not a lot of...
not a lot of uptake, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, whether we like it or we don't like it, value-based purchasing is in the healthcare continuum, and that's the direction that it is going. And for me, thinking about quality, I like that quality could maybe be driven by incentive payment. So I guess we'll see how this VBID works out. Any other updates other than the report on what's happening with that?
I think taking a look at the report will give folks really what they need to know. There is some more information in there. Also, the 2023 information was released regarding the number of plans that are going to be participating, because that's one of the key differentiators about the MA VBID program is that participation is voluntary on the part of the payer. So this is not laid out nationally. And perhaps that's part of the reason that we aren't seeing a lot of enrollees, but more information about the number of participating plans and the areas in which they are is also now available for calendar year 2023. And folks, I think those are the two things folks want to look at.
That's great. Well, we'll go ahead and we'll include those links with the Chapcast. So can we switch gears a little bit?
Sure.
Talk about MedPAC. MedPAC recommendation about the hospice cap. This has been an ongoing discussion that you and I know has been ongoing for a couple of years now.
Mm-hmm.
I saw in your update that you were giving the hospice provider community an update of what's happening with that. So where are we at with Hospice Cap and MedPAC?
Sure. As you said, there was this threat that we thought MedPAC had recommended way back for a while now, changes to the way the aggregate cap is calculated. In, I think it was 2020, they recommended that CMS do two things to the cap. The big one was to cut it, straight cut by 20%, and then also to wage adjust it. The hospice payment rates are wage adjusted based on geographic locations. And right now the cap is not. So they made that recommendation. And in fact, we were quite concerned that as we were closing out 2022, we were going to see that Congress maybe took that recommendation and enacted that, but that did not happen in the final budget package. So we were pleased to see that. However, it still very much remains a threat, if you will.
So it's on the table still, yeah?
I think that recommendation is out there, and I think there was an interest from some of the congressional offices in learning a little bit more about it. So I think it's entirely possible that the cap could be cut. I think what we have to remember here is, what MedPAC is really trying to do is to control, length of stay of hospice patients.
Right.
And the caps can do that in some ways, but it doesn't really affect eligibility of the hospice patient at all. And one very important point about the cap is that there's really going to be a cut to the total aggregate cap level for hospices, regardless of this aggregate cap cut recommendation by MedPAC, whether or not that's implemented. And the big change that's resulting in this cut is the change in the way the cap is calculated. So without getting into a lot of detail, there's different economic indexes that
Oh
are used to
God,
calculate the
you're gonna
cap.
lose me.
And well, I don't want to get too far into it, but there was a big change that occurred with the Impact Act and the way that the cap was calculated. And actually what
Right.
happens is that change in calculation actually does reduce the cap by about 20% over what it would have been without that change. So we're already seeing this slow progression in a cut to the cap over what it would have been with this calculation change. And then if we see an additional cut, that could really have significant impact on access to care. We believe that there would be changes to the way hospices accept patients out of necessity.
Oh, absolutely.
Based on the cuts to the cap. And that's a concern, big concern.
Yeah.
Because the patients that would probably maybe not have access to hospice the way they do today are those patients that typically have that longer length of stay. So those patients with, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and those dementia type diagnoses. So this is one to watch and see what happens. I know MedPAC is actually meeting this month. They're going to finalize some more recommendations around hospice. And they're going to be talking about this.
Yeah, makes the great case for palliative care, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I want to end this podcast on a high note, but before we do that and talk about telehealth recertification, we can't ignore, some of the blaring articles that have come out in the past, 6 weeks, 2 months about hospice fraud. And every time, and I know you're saying, 33 years in hospice, that breaks my heart when I read, as someone who's, actually been at the bedside, taking care of someone who's on that journey, to see and read some of this stuff that is happening, it's just heartbreaking and appalling, quite frankly, so
I'm right with you.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. I don't know that I can, describe it any more than that, but, I saw in your notice that you did talk a little bit about hospice fraud and, recommendations to Congress. So, can you fill our listeners in on what's happening on that front?
Sure. Absolutely. I think, as you said, we need to recognize, as much as it pains us, we need to recognize that there are some bad actors in the hospice arena. Certainly don't like to think about it, but there are, and that does not represent the majority of providers at all. But there are still some issues, and a recent New Yorker article raised some of those issues. We have, as you mentioned, some of the other articles from the previous couple of years. And I think that with those issues raised, there is now a higher interest from congressional offices in this particular area.
This feels like 2019 all over again, doesn't it?
It does. God. It does. And there probably should be some changes occurring within the hospice program, the way our regulations are set up, to make it more difficult for providers who are not delivering care the way it should be delivered, and who aren't getting into hospice, for the right reasons to take care of these beneficiaries in the right way, to bring some attention to those folks, so to make it a little bit harder for them to continue providing hospice services and to get Medicare certified. That's probably going to take some changes at the state level. Recently that New Yorker article talked about some of the states, Western states, California, Arizona area, where we're seeing this great proliferation of hospices. So there's definitely going to be some action, I think, that needs to take place at the state level. But there's also probably some legislative as well as regulatory action that could take place at the federal level to kind of help prevent the types of things that we saw in that New Yorker article and in that those 2019 OIG articles from
Absolutely.
occurring, a little bit of additional oversight.
Yeah, it feels to me like when I read all this and, some of the things that are happening to hospice, if you were, around home care in the mid 90s when, we had this sort of thing happening with home health and moratoriums put into place and rehab, it all feels kind of similar to that. I did my exit in the 90s from home health strictly over to hospice because of some of that
Was
stuff,
that timing serendipitous,
Well,
with everything that was going on? Because you're right, it does feel the same way that it did then.
it really
We
does.
had back, this great big, spotlight was shining on home health at the time, and some of the same things that we're seeing occurring in hospice with, a lot of new entrants, meaning new hospice providers coming on board, maybe being sold very shortly after
Right.
becoming certified. A lot of the same things
Right.
that we saw with home health before Operation Restore Trust. And we know what to expect. I think we also learned from that.
Yeah, I think so.
There were things that needed to change, and they did. And we can take those lessons learned and apply them in hospice now. And hopefully that will bring us on the more straight and narrow path.
You know what I think? Somehow in my mind, I think, people would never consider this happening in hospice care. Hospice is
Right.
sacred, but it's still a business. And, a couple of years ago when something came out and I don't know if it was the Wall Street Journal or one of those prominent papers about hospice being a great investment, that just, I think,
Mm-hmm.
pushed the floodgates open for upping the ante on some of these, on buying a hospice for an investment rather, like you said, for the right reasons of going into hospice. I find
Yeah, I think.
myself now when I meet somebody and I say, this is this is what I do. I've been in this space for a long time. Now, if they say to me, "Oh yeah, my grandmother had hospice care," now I have to ask, "How was her experience?" Or "Did you have
Mm-hmm.
a good experience?" Rather than 15, 20 years ago, it was just a given that you had a great experience with hospice. But that's not so much the case, is it?
It is not. And, 15, 20 years ago, not everybody even knew about hospice. So now I think we have progressed. A lot more people know about hospice and know what to expect when receiving hospice care, which is good. And we want even more individuals who are at that final stage of life to understand and know what benefits are available to them. We don't want to see that hindered in any way. And I think that's important to keep that in mind as we move forward. But I think you're right, like with any business, and really even sometimes we talk about for-profit or not-for-profit hospices. There are for-profit and not-for-profit healthcare providers throughout the entire healthcare spectrum.
Right.
And all have to approach care in the same way. And what really needs to happen is making sure that all of them, even if you're in it for a business, because there's nothing really wrong with trying to be in a business that serves individuals, as long as you make sure that you're doing that the way it is intended to be done.
Exactly. And don't
And
forget what your true north is, right?
exactly. And as long as you keep that at the forefront of everything that you do, and you stay abreast of how best to do that, I think everything will be fine. But I think we probably are going to be seeing some changes over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think you're
To make
absolutely right.
sure that everybody's doing that.
Yeah. Well, if it's something that's going to promote compliance and quality with a optimal outcome for patients and families, I know You feel that way. I feel that way. CHAP feels that way. NAHC feels that way. So, whatever we can do to turn this boat around and get it going in the right direction, I think everybody's all for that.
That's one thing that's a real positive that's come out of this recently. There's several national associations that represent terminally ill individuals, their interest, and hospice providers. And one of the positive that's really come out of this is that all of those national associations are working together. We are committed to making sure that only hospice providers who are doing the right things are in the hospice space. And I'm really pleased to see that everybody is working together, and we're all here to work with CHAP and accrediting organizations and surveyors, CMS, program integrity folks, the OIG. We all want to work together to eliminate these bad actors.
Absolutely. Collaboration is most required at this point. So, Katie, I'm saving the best for last, I think, which might be kind of a little gift, but can you tell us about the telehealth recertification? The blip you had in your newsletter. So what's that all about?
Great change for hospices, at least through December 31st of 2024, that CMS is going to allow hospices to utilize telehealth. This is something that I really think is a value add that we've gotten really from going through the pandemic. Hospices have always been able to use some sort of telecommunications, whether it's picking up the telephone or, one-way video, two-way video. We've always been able to use that to supplement what we're doing. And I think CMS is now finally recognizing that it's time to look at ways that we can bring that into the mainstream and how we're delivering care. And this change to, or extension, I should say, really, to allow hospices to use telehealth with recertifications through 2024 will, I think, provide an opportunity for us in hospice to look at ways that we can provide care more efficiently. This is one of the ways that we can help deal with this workforce shortage that we're seeing, and maybe not having real quick access to physicians, to nurse practitioners. I think we are going to see probably some permanent change coming. I think that CMS will start to collect data, at least we hope, collect some data on how telehealth is being utilized, not just for recertifications for hospice, but also how it's being utilized to supplement those in-person visits. They're doing it with home health. There are 3 new G codes actually that have been added to home health claims.
Yay!
And I'm hoping to see that come to hospice eventually, so that we move just beyond, the recertification component and into recognizing these visits.
That's so great.
Doesn't mean that CMS is paying for them on home health side. They're not.
No, but at least they're tracking
doing
them and can measure something. Right. Yeah, that's important. No, that's good news to hear about it on the home health side. Hopefully that can come to hospice. And you said the most important phrase, I think, when you're talking about this topic is to supplement in-person visits. Because we can easily see this going to the dark side of replacing in-person visits rather than supplementing. I do think this is a value add on the hospice side, particularly for individualizing that care that a patient and family might need. So that's great news. And you got to deliver it to all the listeners.
It's great news. Yes, that's right.
Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here because we talked about a lot of important things today. And I want to thank you, Katie, for joining the podcast to share all of this important information. Any closing thoughts for our listeners?
Well, first, thank you very much for having me. I enjoy your Tapcast. hard for me to say, Chapcast,
I
but I
know.
do listen to all of them, and you have some excellent, relevant topics. So thank you for inviting me here today to share information. And I think just in parting, I want to thank you for everything that you're doing and what CHAP is doing to advance care for the patients that we serve, but also to the hospices out there who are listening. I think this is the year to really buckle down and really revisit, as you said, Jennifer, kind of what your true north is, and revisit, how are you doing this? Are you doing it in a way that meets that true north and still provides you with the finances that you need in order to keep doing that?
That's so well spoken, and reciprocal thanks to you at NAHC and your colleagues for the collegial relationship that we do share with you. That, you know, we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. So thank you.
That's right. We're all in this together. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it for today. The CHAP team and I thank you out there in listening land for taking the time out of your day to plug into our podcast. Hopefully, you've taken more than one small pearl of wisdom away from our conversation today with Katie Wehri. So again, thank you for joining, and stay safe and well, and thanks for all you do.